The champagne flute in my hand was baccarat crystal, worth more than my entire dorm room, and I was seriously considering throwing it at my father's head. We were standing in the rose garden of the Belmont Hotel, surrounded by 200 of San Francisco's elite, all of whom thought they were attending my engagement party. What they did not know, what none of them could understand, was that I had met my fiancé exactly once, 3 days ago, for precisely 12 minutes. His name was Dante Caruso. He was 40 years old. I had overheard hushed, terrified whispers from my father's study over the past month. These revealed he now owned every debt, secret, and desperate mistake my family made in the last decade. My name is Isabella Merchant. I am 20 years old, and I have just been sold like a thoroughbred mare to consolidate a business deal I never fully understood. The garden was beautiful in that carefully orchestrated way that screamed of money and status. White roses climbed trellises that probably cost more than a car. String lights were woven through the trees like captured stars. A quartet played something classical and tasteful in the corner. Servers in crisp uniforms circulated with trays of delicacies I could not even pronounce. My mother stood near the fountain, her smile frozen in place, greeting guests with the practiced grace of a woman who had spent her entire life performing. She wore Chanel and diamonds, but also desperation. My father, Senator Richard Merchant, worked the crowd with his trademark charisma, shaking hands and making promises he had no intention of keeping. He had been doing that my whole life. It was his specialty. What he was not good at, apparently, was managing money, avoiding gambling debts, or keeping his business dealings clean enough to avoid the attention of men like Dante Caruso. I was in my second year at Berkeley, majoring in art history and planning a study abroad trip to Florence. I lived in a cramped dorm with a roommate, surviving on dining hall pizza and late-night study sessions. I was still figuring out who I was, what I wanted from life. Then my father had called, not asked, called, summoned. The conversation had been brief and devastating. He needed me to come home. There was a situation. A solution had been found. I was that solution. When I had arrived at our family's Pacific Heights mansion 2 weeks ago, I had expected a conversation, an explanation, maybe even an apology. What I got was a final demand. I was to marry Dante Caruso, and in return, my father's considerable debts would be forgiven. Certain business interests would be protected, and the Merchant family name would remain pristine. My input was not required. My consent was assumed. My entire future had been negotiated while I was studying for a Renaissance art midterm. The irony of learning about the Medici marriages while my own was being arranged was not lost on me. I had raged. I had cried. I had threatened to run. My mother sat me down in her morning room and poured tea from a pot that had been in her family for generations. She explained the reality of my situation with a cold pragmatism that chilled me more than any threat. We were broke. Worse than broke. We were drowning. My father had made deals with the wrong people, taken loans from lenders who did not accept defaults, and built a house of cards that was collapsing. The Caruso family had offered a solution, an alliance through marriage. It was old-fashioned, yes, but it was effective. Dante Caruso wanted legitimacy. He wanted to clean his family's reputation, to move their business interests into the legitimate world of real estate, tech investments, and political influence. What better way than to marry into an old San Francisco family, to become connected to a senator, to buy his way into respectability? And what did I get? I got to save my family from ruin. I got to be the beautiful daughter. I got to sacrifice my plans, my freedom, my youth for the mistakes of a man who had never once asked me what I wanted from life. The thing that made it worse, the thing that made me want to scream until my throat bled, was that a part of me had always known this was possible. I had grown up in this world of carefully arranged marriages, of strategic alliances, of daughters used as currency. I just always believed I would be different. I had been naive. Now, I stood in a garden full of people who did not know they were attending a funeral disguised as a celebration, and I waited for my future husband to arrive. I had met him 3 days ago, in my father's study. The meeting had been brief, formal, and utterly surreal. He had arrived with 2 men who stood by the door like statues, their eyes constantly moving, assessing threats. Dante himself had been unexpected. I had imagined a monster, a crude, violent man who fit every stereotype of the word mafia that Americans had been fed through movies and television. What walked into that study was something far more dangerous. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with the kind of build that suggested both power and discipline. His suit was Italian, perfectly tailored, probably worth more than my tuition. His dark hair was touched with silver at the temples, and his face was all sharp angles and hard lines, like something carved from marble by an angry sculptor. But it was his eyes that had made me forget to breathe. They were dark, almost black, and they held an intelligence and intensity that had made me feel utterly exposed. He had looked at me like he could see every thought, every fear, every desperate plan to escape that I had been forming. He had looked at me like he already owned me. He had introduced himself. His voice was deep with the faintest trace of an Italian accent. He had asked me if I understood the arrangement. I had said yes, because what else could I say? He had told me that he would expect me to fulfill my duties as his wife, but that he would not be a cruel husband. He would provide for me, protect me, respect me within reason. In return, he expected loyalty, discretion, and the appearance of a happy marriage. Then he had done something that had surprised me. He had asked if I had any questions. I had had 1,000, but in that moment, with my father hovering anxiously and this stranger studying me with those obsidian eyes, I had only managed one. Why me? His answer had been simple. Because you are exactly what I need. Beautiful, young, well-bred, and trapped. You will not run because you love your family. You will not betray me because you are too smart to choose destruction. And you will learn to accept this because you are a survivor. Then he had left and I had stood in my father's study, shaking with rage and terror and a strange unwanted curiosity about the man who had just read me like an open book. Now, standing in the garden with the weight of that encounter still pressing on my chest, I watched the entrance and waited for him to arrive. The party had been going for an hour. Guests were beginning to murmur, their polite confusion barely masked by champagne and canopies. Where was the groom to be? My father's smile was growing strained. My mother's hand clutched her pearls as if they were a lifeline. I felt a perverse satisfaction in their discomfort. Let them worry. Let them feel a fraction of the anxiety that had been eating me alive for 2 weeks. Then the murmuring stopped. The garden fell into a strange, heavy silence, like the moment before a storm breaks. I turned toward the entrance and saw him. Dante Caruso did not arrive at parties. He made entrances. He came alone, which was somehow more intimidating than if he had brought an army. He wore a charcoal suit that made him look like he had stepped out of a film about elegant, dangerous men. His presence seemed to shift the very air in the garden, making it heavier, more charged. People moved out of his way without seeming to realize, creating a natural path as he walked toward me. His eyes never left mine. My father rushed forward, hand extended, voice booming with false warmth. Dante shook his hand briefly, said something too quiet for me to hear, and then dismissed him with the kind of polite finality that made my father step back like he had been physically pushed. Then Dante was standing in front of me, and the rest of the garden might as well have ceased to exist. Up close, he was even more imposing than I remembered. The silver at his temples caught the light from the string lights above us. There were lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled, though I had not seen evidence of it yet. He smelled of expensive cologne and something darker, something that made me think of leather, night air, and dangerous promises. Isabella, he said, my name sounding different in his mouth, the syllables shaped by that faint Italian accent. You look beautiful. It was not a compliment. It was an observation, delivered with the same tone he might use to comment on the weather. I did not thank him. You are late, I said, and I was pleased that my voice came out steady, even cold. Something flickered in his dark eyes. Amusement maybe, or approval. I had business to attend to. I do not apologize for my work. You could have sent word, I said. I could have, he agreed. But I did not think it was necessary. The party would wait. You would wait because neither of us has a choice in this, do we? The honesty was like a slap. Most men would have pretended, would have played the role of the eager groom, would have maintained the fiction for the sake of the audience. Dante did not bother. I should have been offended. Instead, I felt a strange respect. At least he was not pretending this was a love match. At least he was giving me the dignity of the truth. No, I said quietly. We do not. He held out his hand. Shall we give them what they came for? I looked at his hand. It was large, strong, with long fingers and a scar across his knuckles that told a story I probably did not want to know. This was it. The moment where I could still refuse, still make a scene, still choose self-destruction over surrender. But I thought of my mother's frightened eyes, my father's desperation, the life I had barely started to build that would be obliterated if I walked away. And I thought of something else, too. A curiosity, a question. This man had looked at me and seen something he wanted, something he needed. Not just a trophy or a pawn, but something more. What was it? What did he see when he looked at me? I placed my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, warm and firm, and I felt that touch everywhere, like an electric current running through my entire body. He led me to the center of the garden, where a small platform had been set up. My father took the microphone, his senator's voice carrying across the crowd. He spoke about legacy, family, and the joy of new beginnings. He thanked everyone for coming. He made it sound like a fairy tale. I stood next to Dante and felt his presence like a wall of heat beside me. He did not touch me except for his hand still holding mine, but I was intensely aware of him. The breadth of his shoulders, the controlled power in his stillness, the way his thumb moved almost imperceptibly against my palm, was a small rhythmic motion that might have been unconscious but felt deliberately intimate. When my father finished his speech, Dante took the microphone. His voice amplified, rolled over the crowd like dark honey. "Thank you all for celebrating with us tonight," he said. "I know many of you are curious about this union. Let me be clear. Isabella Merchant is an extraordinary young woman, intelligent, principled, with a bright future. I am honored that she has agreed to become my wife. I will spend the rest of my life ensuring she never regrets that decision." The words were perfect, gracious, romantic, and exactly what the crowd wanted to hear. But there was something underneath them, a steel core that transformed the pretty speech into something else. A warning, a promise, a claim. He turned to me then, still holding the microphone, and his eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "I know this is not what you would have chosen," he said quietly. His voice now meant only for me, though the microphone carried it to everyone. "But I will make you a promise, Isabella. You will be protected. You will be provided for. You will be respected. And you will never, ever be bored." Then he kissed me. I had not expected it. We had not kissed during our first meeting. This was supposed to be just an engagement party, not a wedding. He pulled me close, his free hand resting at the small of my back. He kissed me then, in front of 200 people, my parents, and all of San Francisco society. It was not a chaste, appropriate kiss. It was possessive, claiming. His mouth was firm and warm against mine, and he kissed me like he had every right to, like I already belonged to him, like the 6 weeks until the wedding were just a formality. I should have pulled away, should have been outraged at the presumption, but something in me responded, something primal and traitorous that had nothing to do with logic or dignity. My hand came up to his chest. Whether to push him away or pull him closer, I honestly did not know. I could feel his heart beating under my palm, steady and strong, and the solid reality of him was overwhelming. When he pulled back, the garden erupted in applause. He kept his eyes on me, and I saw satisfaction there, and something else, recognition. He had felt my response. He knew. "The game has begun, Tesoro," he murmured, his lips still close enough that I could feel the words against my skin. "Let us see how well you play." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and hollow congratulations. I moved through the crowd like an automaton, accepting well wishes from people who had no idea what they were celebrating. Dante stayed by my side, his hand occasionally at my lower back, a possessive gesture that everyone interpreted as affection. Every touch sent a confusing jolt through me that I desperately tried to ignore. Mrs. Wellington, one of my mother's oldest friends, gushed about how romantic it all was. "A whirlwind courtship," she said, her eyes sparkling with champagne and gossip. "How did you two meet?" I opened my mouth, having no idea what lie to tell. But Dante smoothly intervened. "Through business," he said, his voice warm and easy in a way I had not heard before. "I was meeting with the senator about a development project. Isabella came by, and the moment I saw her, I knew. Some things you recognize immediately. The things that will change your life." It was a perfect lie delivered with just enough sincerity to be believable. Mrs. Wellington practically melted. After she floated away to spread this romantic fiction to her friends, I looked up at Dante. "You are good at this," I said quietly. "At what?" "Lying. Making people believe whatever you want them to believe." His expression did not change, but something in his eyes hardened. "It is not lying, Isabella. It is controlling the narrative. There is a version of the truth for every audience. You will learn to do the same." "I am not a liar," I said. "No," he agreed. "You are not. You are refreshingly honest. Actually, it is dangerous." He moved closer, his head dipping so he could speak directly into my ear, his breath warm against my skin. "But you will learn because the alternative is letting other people control your story. And I do not think you want that any more than I do." Before I could respond, my father appeared, his hand gripping my elbow with more force than necessary. "Isabella, there are some people I want you to meet." "Excuse us, Dante." For the first time that evening, I saw something dark flash across Dante's face. He looked at my father's hand on my arm, then at his face, and the temperature seemed to drop by 10 degrees. "Senator," Dante said softly, "I would appreciate it if you would remove your hand from my fiancée. If you need her attention, you can ask for it politely." My father's face went through several shades of color, red, white, a sickly purple, but he let go. Dante's hand replaced my father's, but the touch was completely different. Gentle, almost protective. "If you will excuse us," Dante continued, his voice still dangerously soft. "Isabella has been on her feet for hours. We are going to take a walk." He did not wait for permission. He guided me away from my father through the crowd toward the far end of the garden where a path led into the hotel's private grounds. I should have objected to being managed like this, passed from one man's control to another's, but I was too stunned by what had just happened. Dante had just publicly checked my father, had defended me, and had drawn a line. Once we were out of sight of the party, walking along a path lined with Japanese maples, I finally found my voice. "You did not have to do that." "Yes," he said. "I did. He is my father," I said. "He is a man who sold his daughter to pay his debts. He does not get to put his hands on you like you are his property anymore. You are mine now." The possessiveness in his words should have infuriated me. Instead, it sent a strange thrill down my spine that I absolutely refused to examine. "I am not property," I said firmly. "I am not yours or his or anyone's." He stopped walking and turned to face me in the shadows of the trees with only the distant lights from the party illuminating his face. He looked almost otherworldly, beautiful and terrible and completely in control. "You are right," he said, surprising me. "You are not property. You are a person, an intelligent, strong person, who has been put in an impossible situation. But let me be very clear about something, Isabella. In 6 weeks you will be my wife. That means something in my world. It means you are under my protection. It means anyone who harms you, threatens you, or disrespects you answers to me, including your father." He stepped closer and I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. I watched him grab you like that with anger in his eyes, and I saw fear in yours. "That will not happen again, ever. Do you understand?" I did see it then. The thing my mother had tried to explain, the reason why this arrangement, as archaic and wrong as it was, might actually be a kind of salvation. My father had been rough with me before, never violent exactly, but careless, demanding. He would grab my arm to emphasize a point, pull me aside when he wanted something, and manhandle me like I was an extension of his will. I had learned to accept it as normal, as just the way he was. But Dante had seen it for what it was: disrespect, a violation of my autonomy, and he had stopped it. "I understand," I said quietly. "Good." He did not move away. Instead, he reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering against my cheek. The gesture was surprisingly tender, at odds with everything I thought I knew about this man. "I know you are afraid of me," he said. "I know you think I am a monster who has stolen your life. Maybe I am, but I want you to understand something. The marriage contract your father signed with me includes several clauses that he is unaware of, clauses that protect you." "What kind of clauses?" I asked. "A trust fund in your name alone that he cannot access. A prenuptial agreement that ensures if our marriage fails, you walk away with enough money never to need anyone again. A legal document that transfers ownership of your student loan debt to me, meaning it is paid in full as of this morning. And most importantly, a clause that states you cannot be compelled to continue the marriage if I am ever physically or psychologically abusive. My own lawyer will meet with you privately next week to explain your rights." I stared at him, unable to process what I was hearing. "Why would you do that?" "Because I do not want a victim, Isabella. I do not want a terrified girl who stays with me because she has no choice. I want a partner, someone who chooses to build this life with me, even if the initial circumstances were not her choice. I am giving you the tools to leave if you need to. I am hoping you will not need them." His hand was still against my face, his thumb now tracing my cheekbone with a gentleness that seemed impossible from a man of his reputation. "I am 40 years old. I have built an empire through violence, strategy, and ruthlessness. I have done things that would make you sick if you knew the details. But I have also learned that true power is not about force. It is about loyalty, respect, partnership. I could keep you prisoner, but I would rather earn your trust." "That could take years," I whispered. "I have years," he said. "I have the rest of our lives, and I am a patient man when I want something badly enough." "And you want me?" I asked. The question came out more vulnerable than I had intended. His eyes darkened, and for the first time, I saw real hunger there. Not just strategic interest or calculated desire, but something raw and honest. "I want you more than I have wanted anything in a very long time," he said, his voice rough. "From the moment I saw your photograph, learned about your life, I knew you were different, special. When I met you in person, when you looked at me with fear, but also defiance, when you asked me why, I knew I had been right. You are not just beautiful, you are bright, strong, unbroken, despite everything your family has put you through. Yes, Isabella, I want you desperately." Then he did something that shattered every preconception I had. He stepped back, put distance between us, dropped his hand from my face. "But I will not touch you again tonight," he said. "Not unless you ask me to. You have had enough decisions made for you. This one is yours." The silence that fell between us was heavier than any argument could have been. The distant sounds of the party, the laughter, the clinking glasses, the quartet felt like they were coming from another planet. Here in the shadowed quiet of the garden path, the world had been remade with new impossible rules. Dante Caruso had just handed me a key to a gilded cage and told me I was the one who got to decide whether to lock the door from the inside. My mind was a whirlwind, trying to reconcile the man standing before me with the monster I had constructed in my head. The monster was simple, predictable in his cruelty. This man, with his promises of trust funds and legal protections, with his terrifying honesty and his unexpected restraint, was infinitely more complex and dangerous. He had seen my fear of my father, and had acted. He had seen my defiance and had called it strength. He had looked at the raw material of my life, a life that had barely begun, and had decided I was worth building a partnership with, not just a possession to be displayed. I did not know what to do with that. It would have been easier if he had been the brute I expected him to be. I could have hated him cleanly. Now my hatred was muddied with a confusing, unwelcome flicker of something else. Not gratitude, not attraction. It was the first faint spark of curiosity, and that felt more treacherous than anything. I do not know what to say, I finally admitted, my voice barely a whisper in the dark. You do not have to say anything, he replied. His hands were in his pockets now. His posture relaxed, but his gaze was still intensely focused on me. You just have to think. You have 6 weeks to do it. To decide what kind of wife you are going to be, the terrified hostage, the resentful prisoner, or he trailed off, leaving the final option hanging in the air between us. Or what? I asked against my better judgment. Or the queen of a kingdom you never knew you wanted, he said. And there was no arrogance in his tone, only a simple, stark statement of fact. My world is not kind, Isabella, but it is real. It has rules, consequences, and tangible rewards. There is no hypocrisy in it. People show you exactly who they are because the cost of pretending is too high. You might find you prefer it to the gilded lies you were raised in. He gestured back toward the party. That is the fantasy, the carefully constructed performance. My world is the truth, ugly and beautiful and brutal, and I am offering you a place at the very top of it. He started walking back toward the lights, not waiting for me. Come, we have been gone long enough. Your parents will be having palpitations. I stood frozen for a moment longer, watching him retreat. The sheer audacity of the man was breathtaking. He had just reframed my entire forced marriage as an invitation to join a more honest, powerful reality. It was a manipulation, of course, a brilliant one. He appealed to the part of me always disgusted by my parents' shallow, performative world. This was the part that craved something real and meaningful, even if it proved dangerous. I had to force my feet to move, to follow him back into the glittering fiction of the engagement party. As I emerged from the shadows of the path, the light felt too bright, the noise too loud. My mother spotted me immediately and rushed over, her face a mask of concern. Isabella, where have you been? People were starting to talk. We needed a moment alone, Dante said, appearing at my side as if from nowhere. He slid his arm around my waist, his touch firm and possessive, a stark contrast to the distance he had maintained moments before. He was putting on the show again, playing his part. It is not every day a man gets engaged to the most beautiful woman in San Francisco. My mother's anxiety melted away under the warmth of his practiced charm. Of course. It is just so romantic. She beamed at us, and I felt a pang of pity for her. She was so relieved to be saved from the brink, so eager to believe this was a happy ending that she could not see the complex, dangerous currents swirling beneath the surface. For the next hour, I played my role. I smiled. I nodded. I accepted congratulations. I leaned into Dante's side when he pulled me close, and I tried to ignore the way my body reacted to his proximity, the heat of him, the solid strength, the scent of his cologne. It was all becoming familiar, a dangerous comfort in the midst of the chaos. He was a rock in a stormy sea, and even though the rock belonged to the storm, my instincts were to cling to it. Finally, the party began to wind down. Guests started to leave, offering final effusive goodbyes. My father, emboldened by champagne and the apparent success of the evening, clapped Dante on the shoulder. A triumph, my boy. A complete triumph. Dante's smile was thin and did not reach his eyes. It served its purpose, Richard. The use of my father's first name, along with the subtle dismissal in his tone, made his charisma falter. He cleared his throat. Well, yes, of course. We will see you for brunch on Sunday to discuss the wedding details. I will have my assistant check my schedule and get back to you, Dante said, his politeness a weapon. He turned to me, effectively bringing the conversation with my father to a close. Are you ready to go? My car is here. I came with my parents, I said. I will need to go home with them. No, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. You will come with me. There is something I want to show you. My mother looked startled. Dante, it is rather late and propriety. Propriety is what I say it is, he interrupted her gently, but with a finality that silenced her. She is my fiancée. She is under my protection now. She will come with me. He was not asking. The shift was palpable. The charming, attentive fiancé was gone, and in his place was the Don, the man who made decisions and expected them to be obeyed. My father wisely said nothing. He just nodded, avoiding my eyes. I felt a fresh wave of anger at his cowardice, but it was dulled by the new reality settling over me. Dante was right. I was his now. The legal documents, the promises, the engagement ring on my finger, they were all just symbols of a transfer of power that had already taken place. All right, I said, my voice quiet but clear. I would not give him the satisfaction of a fight in front of my parents. I would preserve that last shred of dignity. Dante's lips curved in a slight approving smile. He knew what I was doing, and he respected it. He guided me out of the garden, his hand on the small of my back, through the opulent lobby of the Belmont, and out to the circular driveway. Waiting there was not a limousine, but a low-slung black Bentley Continental, sleek and powerful, and silent. A man in a dark suit, not one of the statues from my father's study, but a driver, held the door open. Dante handed me into the back seat, and I slid across the smooth, cool leather. He got in after me, and the door closed with a soft, expensive thud, sealing us in a quiet, perfumed world. The driver got in, and a moment later, we pulled away from the hotel, leaving my old life shrinking in the rearview mirror. I stared out the window at the lights of the city, at the familiar streets I had known my whole life. They looked different now. Smeller. You are angry, Dante observed. He was not looking at me. He was looking at his phone, scrolling through messages. Not angry, I said, which was a lie. Overwhelmed. That is to be expected. He put his phone away and turned his full attention to me. The interior of the car was dim, lit only by the dashboard lights and the occasional street lamp we passed. It made his features seem even sharper, more dramatic. The feeling will pass. You will acclimatize. The human capacity for adaptation is remarkable, especially when one has no other choice. Is that how you see me? As a specimen adapting to a new environment, I asked. I see you as a remarkable young woman in an impossible situation who is handling it with more grace and intelligence than most men I know would be capable of, he said. The honesty in his voice was disarming. The anger will come and go. The fear will ebb and flow. But underneath it all, you have a core of steel. I saw it the moment you looked at me in your father's study. You were terrified, but you were not broken. That is why you are here. We drove in silence for a while, leaving the bright lights of downtown and climbing into the dark winding roads of the Presidio, heading toward the Golden Gate Bridge. Where are we going? I asked. Home, he said. My home. It is time you saw it. The bridge stretched before us, a red-orange arc against the blackness of the bay and the night sky. We crossed into Marin County, and the driver navigated the car through the wooded exclusive enclaves of Sausalito. Finally, we turned onto a private road flanked by tall, silent redwoods. A massive iron gate slid open silently as we approached, and we proceeded up a long, steep driveway. At the top of the cliff, the house revealed itself. It was a modern masterpiece of glass and steel, cantilevered over the world's edge. It looked out over the dark, churning waters of the bay and San Francisco's glittering skyline in the distance. It was breathtaking, and it was a fortress. The car stopped at the entrance and Dante got out, coming around to open my door. I stepped out, the cool, salty air off the Pacific hitting my face. The only sounds were the wind and the distant rhythmic crash of waves on the rocks far below. Welcome to the glass house, he said, his voice quiet in the vastness of the night. He led me inside. The interior was even more stunning. Soaring ceilings, walls of glass, minimalist furniture in shades of gray and charcoal. A massive abstract painting dominated one wall, a swirl of dark colors that suggested a storm at sea. It was beautiful, but it felt empty. A showpiece, not a home. It was the house of a man who owned everything, but lived with nothing. It is impressive, I said. Because it is a statement, he corrected me. It says I have the money and the power to build a house on the edge of a cliff and make it stand. It says I have nothing to hide. It says I can see everything that approaches me. He walked to the wall of glass looking out at the city. It is also the most secure private residence on the West Coast. Bulletproof glass, state-of-the-art surveillance, a panic room, armed guards you will never see. He turned to look at me. You are safe here, Isabella. Safer than you have ever been in your life. I believed him. The safety felt like another layer of the cage, but it was real and tangible. In my parents' world, the threats were social, financial, the slow, quiet erosion of status. Here, the threats were physical, immediate, and the defenses were just as direct. "This will be your home after the wedding," he said. "But there is a guest wing completely separate from my rooms. You will stay there tonight. You will have your own space, your own privacy." As I said, "The next move is yours." A woman appeared, silent as a ghost. She was in her 50s with a severe, handsome face and sharp, intelligent eyes. "This is Solana," Dante said. "She manages the household. She will show you to your rooms. If you need anything at all, you tell her." Solana gave a slight formal nod. "Signorina," her accent was thick Italian. "If you will follow me." I looked at Dante, this man who was a labyrinth of contradictions, ruthless and protective, demanding and patient, a monster who offered freedom. He stood in the center of his magnificent empty fortress, a king without a queen, and he was waiting for me to decide if I would take the crown. "Good night, Isabella," he said, his dark eyes unreadable. "Sleep well." I turned and followed Solana down a wide, cool hallway, feeling his gaze on my back until I turned a corner and was out of his sight. The guest suite was as impeccably designed as the rest of the house. A bedroom with a wall of glass looking out at the bay, a luxurious bathroom and a sitting area. My suitcase was already there, placed neatly by the bed. My father must have had it sent over. The efficiency of it all, the assumption, made me shiver. Solana showed me the features of the room, her manner efficient and impersonal. When she left, closing the door softly behind her, I was finally alone. I walked to the window and pressed my hands against the cool, unbreakable glass. The city I had called home my entire life sparkled in the distance, a beautiful, untouchable diorama. I was on the outside now. I was in the fortress looking out. I looked at my reflection in the glass. A pale, wide-eyed girl in an elegant, hopelessly expensive dress, a diamond engagement ring glittering on her finger. The college sophomore was gone. The senator's daughter was gone. Who was left? I did not know yet, but as I stood there in the overwhelming silence of Dante Caruso's world, I felt the first terrifying stirrings of her emergence. The silence in the suite was absolute, a stark contrast to the noisy chaos of my own life just hours before. It was the kind of quiet that felt heavy, expensive, and profoundly isolating. I stood at the window for a long time, just watching the lights of the city, trying to make the reality of my situation sink in. My engagement ring felt like a lead weight on my finger. I finally turned away from the view, my body aching with a fatigue that was more emotional than physical. The dress I wore, a designer confection my mother had chosen, suddenly felt like a costume. I unzipped it and let it pool on the floor, not caring about the expensive fabric. In my suitcase, I found my own clothes. Soft cotton pajamas with a faded Berkeley logo worn from countless washes. Putting them on was a small, defiant act of reclaiming a piece of myself. The bed was enormous, the sheets cool and crisp. I slipped between them, expecting to lie awake for hours, my mind racing, but the exhaustion was too profound. The last thing I remember was the faint, distant sound of the ocean, a lullaby from my new dangerous world. I was woken by a sliver of brilliant morning sun cutting through a gap in the automated blinds. For a single disorienting moment, I did not know where I was. The room was foreign. The light was wrong. The air smelled different, clean and salty with a hint of lemon polish. Then it all crashed back. The party, the kiss, the car ride, the glass house on the cliff. I sat up, my heart thudding. The city across the bay was bathed in clear golden light. The water a dazzling, impossible blue. It was so beautiful it felt like a mockery. There was a soft knock at the door. Before I could answer, Solana entered carrying a tray. She was dressed in a stark black uniform, her posture ramrod straight. "Good morning, Signorina," she said, her voice devoid of warmth. She set the tray on a table by the window. It held a pot of coffee, a small pitcher of steamed milk, a glass of orange juice, and a perfect flaky croissant. "Don Caruso has left for the city. He asked me to inform you that his driver will be at your disposal today should you wish to go anywhere. He also said you have an appointment with his lawyer, Mr. Avellino, at 3 o'clock this afternoon at his offices in the financial district. The driver will take you." She delivered the information like a soldier, relaying orders. There was no good morning or how did you sleep. No pleasantries. This was not a home. It was a command post. "Thank you, Solana," I said, my voice still rough with sleep. She gave that same slight formal nod, and left as silently as she had arrived. I was alone again. The coffee was rich and strong, the croissant buttery and light. I ate and drank, looking out at the view, feeling like a spectator at my own life. An appointment with his lawyer to discuss the clauses, the trust fund, the prenuptial agreement. The reality of it was both terrifying and I had to admit a little thrilling. He was giving me an escape route. He was handing me power. Why? Was it a trick? a sophisticated form of psychological manipulation designed to make me compliant. Or was he, against all odds, telling the truth? After showering and dressing in my own jeans and a simple sweater, I felt a little more grounded. I ventured out of my room and explored the wing. It was like a luxury hotel suite, a living area, a small kitchenette, everything impeccably furnished and utterly impersonal. There were no photographs, no books, no signs that anyone had ever lived here. It was a beautiful shell. I found my way back to the main living area. In the daylight, the house was even more stunning. The views so panoramic they were almost dizzying. I also saw the details I had missed in the dark. The discreet cameras in the corners of the ceiling, the sleek black keypad by the front door, the sheer uncluttered spaces that offered nowhere to hide. This was Dante's world. Beautiful, transparent, and under total surveillance. A different man, younger, and dressed in a dark suit, but without the imposing bulk of the usual bodyguards, found me. Signorina Merchant, I am Marco, the driver. Don Caruso said you might need to go into the city. He was polite, his eyes careful and alert. I had nowhere to go. My dorm room was almost empty. My parents' house was the last place I wanted to be. But the thought of staying in this silent, gorgeous prison all day was suffocating. I would like to go to the Legion of Honor Museum, I said on impulse. It was my favorite place in the city. A sanctuary of quiet art overlooking the Pacific. A place that felt like mine. Of course, Marco said without reaction. The ride back into the city was quiet. Marco did not attempt a conversation. He drove with a smooth, confident efficiency. The Bentley glided through the streets, and I watched my old life go by outside the window. We arrived at the museum, its neoclassical columns standing white against the blue sky. Marco opened my door. I will wait for you here, Signorina. Take all the time you need. For the next 2 hours, I wandered the hushed galleries. I stood before my favorite paintings, trying to lose myself in the brushstrokes of the masters, in the stories of saints and myths. But today, the art seemed distant, irrelevant. The drama on the canvases felt tame compared to the one I was living. I was a character in a story now, a dark fairy tale, and I could not escape back into the audience. I found myself in front of a painting I had always loved, Jacques-Louis David's, The Lictors Bring to Brutus the Bodies of His Sons. It depicted the Roman consul Brutus, who condemned his own sons to death for treason, sitting in stoic, terrible silence as their bodies are carried home. The cost of power, the sacrifice of love for duty, the awful lonely weight of leadership. I had always seen it as a historical artifact. Today I saw Dante, a man who would do terrible things for what he believed was right, for the stability of his world. A man who sat in a silent, beautiful house, bearing burdens I could not yet imagine. The thought was unsettling. I was starting to see him as a person, a complex and flawed human being, not just a villain in my story. That made everything so much harder. At 10 minutes to 3, Marco dropped me off in front of a sleek black skyscraper in the financial district. The lobby was adorned with polished granite and muted lighting. I provided my name at the security desk, and I was immediately escorted to a private elevator that required a keycard to operate. It opened directly into a lavish wood-paneled reception area. A severe-looking woman greeted me. "Mr. Avellino is expecting you, Miss Merchant. Right this way." She led me into a corner office with breathtaking views of the bay. The man behind the desk stood up. He was in his 60s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a perfectly tailored suit. "Miss Merchant, a pleasure. I am Alberto Avellino. Please have a seat." He did not smile, but his demeanor was professional, not hostile. For the next hour, he walked me through a stack of documents. It was all true. Everything Dante had said. A trust fund was established in my name, only with an initial deposit that left me reeling. There was a prenuptial agreement that, contrary to what one would expect, was overwhelmingly in my favor. It outlined a generous settlement, a clear division of assets, and specific legally binding protections against any abuse. There was documentation showing that payment had been made on my student loans. Not that I had many yet, but the ones I did have been paid off. There was also a separate confidential addendum that stated that, if I chose to leave the marriage for any reason, I would be provided with a new identity and relocation assistance without any questions asked. "These are highly unusual provisions, Miss Merchant," Avellino said, his fingers steepled. "In my many years of working for Don Caruso, I have never seen him make such concessions. He is a man who believes in clear agreements and absolute control. This document gives you significant control. I am to ensure you understand it completely, and that you sign it of your own free will." "And if I do not sign it," I asked. "Then the marriage, as it is currently conceived, will not proceed," he said. "The basic arrangement with your father would likely still be enforced in some manner, but your protected status would not." Don Caruso was obvious on this point. "Your signature, your understanding, and your consent are required. He was giving me a choice, a real one. I could walk away from him. My father's debts would still trap me, but I would not be bound to Dante. I would be adrift, but I would not be his. It was the first real choice I had been given in weeks. I picked up the expensive, heavy pen lying on the desk. I thought of the fear in my mother's eyes, the desperation in my father's. I thought of the empty museum and the painting of Brutus. I thought of Dante's hand on my back, his voice in the dark garden, his promise of a partnership, of a kingdom. I thought of the terrifying, thrilling unknown. I signed my name, Isabella Merchant. The pen scratched decisively on the paper. It was done. I had chosen my cage, but I had chosen it with my eyes open, and I held the key. Avellino gathered the documents. I will have copies delivered to you. Don Caruso will be informed. He stood, a signal that our meeting was over. Miss Merchant, for what it is worth, I have known Dante since he was a boy. He is a hard man, a dangerous man, but he is not a liar. If he has made you these promises, he will keep them. I rode the elevator back down to the lobby in a daze. Marco was waiting, the Bentley idling at the curb. Back to the house, Signorina, he asked. No, I said, a new resolve settling in my chest. The choice was made. The game was on. Take me to my parents' house. I needed to see them. I needed to look at them from this new terrible height. The Pacific Heights mansion had never felt so small. I stood in my father's study, the same room where my future had been sold, and I told them about the papers I had signed. It establishes a trust fund for me. It pays off my student loans. It guarantees me a significant settlement and legal protections if the marriage ends. My father's smile tightened. Well, of course. Dante is a generous man. He wants to take care of you. He is also paying off your debts, is he not, father? I asked softly. The gambling, the bad investments, the money you borrowed from the wrong people. It is all being cleared. As of this morning, you are in the clear. He had the decency to look ashamed, his eyes dropping to the desk. It is a business arrangement, Isabella. A merger. You have to understand. I do understand, I interrupted him. I understand perfectly. You sold me. You traded my future for your own. And you did it without even having the courage to be honest with me about how deep the trouble was. I leaned forward, placing my hands on his desk. But here is what you need to understand, father. I am no longer your little girl. I am not your asset to be leveraged. I am Dante Caruso's fiancé. And from now on, you will treat me with the respect that position demands. You will not grab my arm. You will not speak to me like a child. You will remember who holds the power now. I saw the shock in his eyes, followed by a flicker of fear. He was seeing the new me, the one Dante had seen all along, the one with a core of steel. Isabella, I have to go, I said, straightening up. I have wedding plans to discuss with my future husband. I turned and walked out, leaving him speechless in his study. My mother was waiting in the foyer, her face pale. She had heard everything. Isabella, was that essential? She whispered. Yes, mother, I said, meeting her gaze. It was. I walked out of the house I had grown up in, and got back into the waiting Bentley. Back to the glass house, Marco, I said as we drove back across the bridge. I did not look at the city. I looked straight ahead at the clifftop fortress that was now my home. I had signed the contract. I had faced my father. I had embraced my role. The terrified girl was receding. In her place was someone else. Someone harder. Someone who was ready to meet her king. The Bentley ascended the winding road, the fortress growing larger with each turn. This time the sight did not fill me with dread, but with a strange sense of purpose. I had drawn a line in the sand with my father. I had signed a document that gave me power. The cage was still a cage, but I was no longer just the bird inside it. I was learning the layout of the bars. Marco pulled up to the entrance. Before he could get out, I opened my own door. Thank you, Marco, I said, my voice firmer than it had been this morning. He gave a slight nod, a flicker of surprise in his otherwise impassive eyes. I walked into the house on my own terms. The vast, silent space felt different. It was no longer just Dante's domain. It was the arena where my new life would play out. Solana appeared as if materializing from the shadows. Signorina, Don Caruso has returned. He is in his study. He asked that you join him. My heart gave a nervous leap, but I kept my expression neutral. Thank you, Solana. I will find my way. I walked through the cool minimalist halls, my footsteps echoing. The door to his study was ajar. I pushed it open. Dante was standing by the window, his back to me, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. The study was unlike the rest of the house. Warmer, lived in. The walls lined with dark wood were adorned with real books, their spines cracked and faded. A massive, ancient desk dominated the room, its surface littered with papers and a single sleek laptop. This was his sanctuary, the inner sanctum. The view is less intimidating from this side, I assume, I said, announcing my presence. He turned. He had shed his suit jacket and tie. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He looked more like a tired executive than a mafia don, and the sight was disarmingly human. It depends on the day, he replied, his dark eyes sweeping over me, taking in my changed demeanor. How was your meeting with Avellino? Informative. I walked further into the room, stopping in front of his desk. I signed the papers. I know, he said. He took a slow sip of his drink. And your visit to your parents. Also informative. I met his gaze squarely. I reminded my father of the new hierarchy. A slow, genuine smile touched Dante's lips. It transformed his face, carving lines of amusement around his eyes and mouth. It was devastating. Did you now? You said you wanted a partner, I said, my pulse quickening, not a victim. I am starting to understand what that means. He set his glass down on the desk and came to stand in front of me. He did not touch me, but his proximity was a physical force. And what does it mean, Isabella? It means I do not have to be afraid of you to respect you. It means I can use the power you have given me. It means I am not just a prize you won. I am an investment you are making. His eyes gleamed with approval. Go on. You told me your world was about truth. Well, here is some truth. I am 20 years old. I was planning to study for midterms and worry about what to wear to a frat party this semester. Now, I am standing in a room with a man who could have me killed with a snap of his fingers, and I am talking about power dynamics. I am in over my head, but I am a fast learner. And you were right about one thing. What is that, he asked. I am not broken. The air between us crackled. The professional distance he had maintained, the careful boundaries felt paper thin. He reached out, but instead of touching my face, he picked up my left hand, his fingers tracing the outline of the engagement ring. This is a symbol, he said, his voice a low rumble. But the real contract is the one you signed today. The real power is the one you are starting to claim for yourself. He looked from the ring to my eyes. I have a business dinner tonight with associates from New York. I want you to come. It was not a request. It was the next test. What is my role? I asked. Your role is to be my fiancé. To be beautiful, to be quiet, and to listen, to watch, to learn the rhythm of my business. These men will see a young girl on my arm. They will underestimate you. That is your advantage. You will hear things they would never say in front of me. He was inviting me into his world, not as a captive, but as an apprentice. The danger was intoxicating. What should I wear? His smile returned, sharper this time. Solana will have something appropriate sent to your room. Be ready at 8 o'clock. He released my hand. The contact was broken. Dismissed. Isabella. I turned and left his study, my mind already racing, my fear now mixed with a sharp anticipatory thrill. The game was indeed afoot. Upstairs, I found a black dress lying on my bed. It was deceptively simple, sleeveless and knee-length, made of a heavy silk that whispered of immense expense. It was not a dress a girl would wear. It was a dress a woman would wear. A weapon. At precisely 8 o'clock, I walked downstairs. Dante was waiting in the foyer. He was back in a flawlessly tailored dark suit, the dawn once more. His eyes traveled over me, from my simple hairstyle to the black dress to my heels, and a spark of pure, unadulterated heat flashed in their depths. It was gone in an instant, but I had seen it. Perfect, he said, his voice neutral, but the intensity of his look had branded me. The dinner was held at a private club in North Beach, a place that exuded the scent of old money, cigar, smoke, and power. The men we met with were like caricatures of movie gangsters, but with better tailored suits and colder eyes. There were 3 of them, all older than Dante, with names like Vinny and Polly. They greeted Dante with a weary respect, and their eyes slid over me with dismissive appraisal. Just a pretty young thing, arm candy. I played my part. I smiled dearly. I spoke only when spoken to, with polite, brief answers. I let Dante hold my chair, let his hand rest on my shoulder, let the fiction of our whirlwind romance hang in the air, and I listened. I listened to the talk on shipping routes and distribution networks. I listened to the complaints about unreliable partners in the Midwest. I listened to the careful coded language they used to discuss violence, the euphemisms for murder and extortion that were as natural to them as discussing the weather. They thought I was a decoration, but I was a sponge. I saw the way Vinny, the one with the thick gold pinky ring, avoided Dante's eyes when he talked about profits from a new nightclub. I noted the slight tremor in Polly's hand when Dante asked a seemingly innocuous question about a missing shipment. I was using the skills I did not even know I had, the skills of a girl who had grown up in a house of lies, learning to read the subtext in every conversation. During a lull, while the men were debating the merits of a particular whiskey, Dante leaned close to me, his lips near my ear. "What do you see?" he murmured, his breath a warm caress. "Vinny is lying about the club's revenue," I whispered back, my eyes on my dessert plate. "And Polly is terrified of you. He is hiding something." Dante did not react, but I felt the subtle shift in his posture, a tightening of satisfaction. "Good girl," he breathed, and the words were a reward more potent than any praise I had ever received. When the dinner ended and the goodbyes were said, we were back in the Bentley, the privacy screen up, sealing us in our own world. The city lights streaked by. "You were right," I said, breaking the silence. "They underestimated me. They always will," Dante replied, looking at me with that unnerving focus. "It is the greatest weapon a woman can have in our world, the illusion of fragility." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black velvet box, a reward for a lesson well learned. I took the box, my fingers trembling slightly. I opened it. Inside was not more jewelry but a key, a simple old-fashioned skeleton key. "What is this?" I asked. "The key to the library in my study," he said. "Every book in there is real. History, philosophy, strategy, art. The knowledge I have collected has helped me build what I have. Consider it your new syllabus." He was giving me access to his mind, to the tools he used to wield his power. It was the most intimate gift he could have given me. I looked from the key to his face. This complex, dangerous man who was systematically dismantling my defenses, not with force, but with trust, with challenge, with a terrifying respect. "I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything," he said, echoing his words from the garden. "Just keep learning." The car pulled up to the glass house. We walked inside, the vast space feeling more familiar now, more like a stage for my transformation than a prison. At the door to my wing, I stopped and turned to him. "Thank you," I said, "for the key." He looked down at me, his expression unreadable in the dim hall light. "The key is just a symbol, Isabella. The real gift is the permission to use it." He did not try to kiss me. He did not touch me. He turned and walked away, leaving me standing there with a key in my hand and a revolution beginning in my soul. I did not go to my room. I went to his study. I used the key. The door swung open on silent hinges, revealing the room that smelled of leather, old paper, and him. I walked to the shelves, my fingers trailing over the spines of Sun Tzu's, The Art of War, Machiavelli's, The Prince, volumes on economic theory and Roman history. This was his heart, and he had just handed me the map. I selected a heavy volume on the history of the Byzantine Empire and took it to the large leather chair by the window. I curled up in it, the book open on my lap, and began to read. I was no longer a 20-year-old girl who had been sold. I was a student of Bauer, and I had just found the most demanding, most captivating teacher imaginable. The night was no longer about fear. It was about possibility. The days began to fold into one another, each one a deliberate lesson in my new brutal curriculum. My life became a strange, bifurcated existence. By day, I was the fiancé attending dress fittings and cake tastings with my mother, who was blissfully immersed in the pageantry of a society wedding. I smiled for photographers, selected floral arrangements, and nodded along as she chattered about linens and seating charts. It was a performance, a pantomime of normalcy that felt like it was happening to someone else. But my real life, the one that pulsed with dangerous energy, began when I returned to the glass house and turned the key in the lock of Dante's study. The library became my sanctuary and my battlefield. I devoured the books he had given me access to, not as dry academic texts, but as instruction manuals for survival. I cross-referenced Machiavelli's advice on fear and love with the dynamics I saw in the men who came to see Dante. I began to understand the concept of strategic patience through Sun Tzu's ancient writings. I recognized this strategy in Dante, who sometimes waited weeks to respond to a provocation. He would then act with such devastating finality that his message was always unmistakable. He had given me the theory, and his life was the practical application. He continued to bring me into his world piece by piece. There were more dinners, more introductions to men with cold eyes and easy smiles. My role was always the same, the quiet, observant fiancé. However, our postmortems, now conducted in the car or his study, had become more detailed and analytical. He would ask for my impressions, and I would give them to him, my confidence growing with each correct assessment. "The man from Los Angeles," I said one night after a tense meeting about territory disputes. "He kept touching his tie when you mentioned the Martinez family. It was a self-soothing gesture. He is more afraid of them than he is of you." Dante had nodded, a look of quiet satisfaction on his face. "The Martinez family has been encroaching on his operations for months. He came to me for help, but was too proud to admit how desperate he is. You saw what my own lieutenants missed. It was during the third week on a rainy Tuesday afternoon that the nature of our lessons underwent a dramatic shift. I was in the library reading a dense treatise on the Code of Silence when Dante entered. He was not dressed for business. He wore dark-worn jeans and a black sweater, looking more like a rugged academic than a crime lord. In his hands, he held two slender, dangerous-looking blades. "The mind is your primary weapon," he said, his voice cutting through the quiet. "But in my world, it cannot be your only one. Come." He led me down a hallway I had never been through, to a part of the house that felt even more secure. He pressed his palm to a scanner, and a seamless section of the wall slid open, revealing a spacious matted room, a gym, but not like any I had ever seen. It was stark and functional, featuring a punching bag, weights, and an array of weapons mounted on one wall. "This is where I train," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. "And now, so will you." He held out one of the blades to me. It was a knife, its handle cold and perfectly balanced in my hand. Fear, cold and sharp, lanced through me. This was different from analyzing conversations. This was visceral, real. "I do not know how to use this," I whispered, the weight of it feeling alien and deadly. "You will," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "The first lesson is not about attacking. It is about escaping. How to break a hold. How to create distance. How to use your smaller size and their underestimation against them." He moved behind me, his body not touching mine, but close enough that I could feel his heat. "If a man grabs you from behind like this," his arms came around me, not aggressively, but firmly, pinning my arms to my sides. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird. "Your instinct is to struggle. That wastes energy. What do you do?" I stood frozen, the knife held uselessly in my hand. "I do not know. You drop your weight, suddenly, make yourself dead weight." His voice was a calm, steady instruction in my ear. "Then you strike backwards with your elbow, aiming for the soft tissue here." He guided my elbow with his hand, showing me the motion. "You create a fraction of an inch of space. That is all you need. Then you use the knife. Not to kill, not yet. To maim, to slice the inside of a thigh to buy yourself a few seconds to run." He spent the next hour drilling me on the movements. Drop, elbow, twist, slash. Over and over until my muscles ached and sweat dampened the back of my neck. He was a relentless yet patient teacher, correcting my stance and adjusting my grip. His touch was always clinical and professional, yet every brush of his fingers against my skin sent a current of awareness. This feeling occurred each time his body moved in tandem with mine to demonstrate a throw or block. This current of awareness was entirely separate from any fear I might have felt. I was learning to wield violence from a man whose mere presence was a form of it. When we finished, I was breathing heavily, my hair sticking to my forehead. He handed me a bottle of water. "You learn quickly," he observed. "You are a good teacher," I managed between gulps. "I have to be." His gaze was serious. "The world I live in does not forgive weakness. And you, Isabella, are now a part of that world. Your safety is my responsibility, but your ability to defend yourself is your own. I will not always be there." It was the starkest acknowledgement yet of the danger I was in, simply by being associated with him. It was not just about my father's debts anymore. It was about the enemies he had made, the rivals who would see me as a vulnerability, a way to get to him. That night, as I soaked in the deep tub of my bathroom, my muscles protesting, I thought about the dichotomy of my life. I was a girl planning a wedding and a woman learning to kill. I was studying the art of the Renaissance and the art of war. I was living in a gilded cage while being taught how to fight my way out of it. The person I had been was fading, replaced by someone harder, sharper, more complex. A few days later, the first real test came. Dante was called away on urgent business to New York. He would be gone for 2 days. He left Luca, his most trusted lieutenant, in charge of the house and my security. "Listen to Luca," he told me, his hand on my shoulder, a rare, brief touch. "Do not leave the grounds. I will be back on Thursday." The house felt cavernous without him. The silence was different, heavier, more watchful. I spent my time in the library and the training room, trying to burn off the nervous energy. On the second evening, as I was reading by the fire, Luca entered the library. His scarred face was grim. "Signorina," he said, his voice a low rumble. "We have a situation. There is a car at the gate. 2 men. They are not expected." A cold knot tightened in my stomach. "Who are they?" "We do not know. They are refusing to identify themselves. They are demanding to speak to Don Caruso." Luca's hand rested on the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. "The protocol is to treat them as hostile." My mind, trained for weeks on strategy and threat assessment, kicked into gear. This was no longer a theoretical exercise. "Where are they now?" "At the main gate. They are not attempting to breach, just waiting." "Are they armed?" "We have to assume so." I stood up, my heart pounding, but my voice was steady. "Show me." Luca led me to the security room, a place I had never been. It was a bank of monitors, showing every angle of the property. On one screen, a black sedan was idling at the iron gate. 2 figures were visible in the front seat. "They have been there for 10 minutes, Luca said. "They are testing us, seeing how we respond to a direct challenge in the Don's absence." The words from The Art of War echoed in my mind. "Appear weak when you are strong, and strong when you are weak." We were weak. Dante was gone. They knew it. What would Dante do? I asked more to myself than to Luca. Luca grunted. He would not show weakness. He would meet the threat head-on, but from a position of power. I looked at the monitors at the 2 men sitting in their car, a silent, menacing question. A show of force was out of the question. We were outnumbered, and Dante was not here. But we had the fortress. We had the high ground. "Tell them," I said, my idea forming quickly, "that the Don is indisposed, but that his advisor will speak with them." Luca stared at me. "Signorina, we do not have a advisor." "You are looking at her," I said, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Patch me through to the gate intercom video and audio, but keep me in here in shadow. They do not get to see who I am." A slow, grudging respect dawned in Luca's eyes. He nodded to one of the other men who typed commands into a console. A moment later, the monitor showing the gate flickered, and a feed from a camera inside the security room, showing only a silhouetted figure, was now being displayed on the small screen at the gate. I picked up the microphone, my hand steady. I lowered my voice, pitching it just enough to sound older, more authoritative. "You are on private property," I said, the words crisp and clear. "State your business or leave." A moment of stunned silence from the car. Then the passenger window rolled down. A man with a thick neck and a scowling face leaned out. "We need to speak with Caruso." "It is urgent." "The Don is unavailable," I replied, layering my voice with a bored indifference I did not feel. "You may deliver your message to me, or you may deliver it to his men when they escort you from this mountain. The choice is yours." I saw the 2 men exchange a look. This was not what they had expected. They had expected a power vacuum and panic. They had not expected a calm, disembodied voice claiming authority. "This is between us and Caruso," the man said, but there was less certainty in his tone. "Then you have wasted a trip," I said, and I gestured for Luca to cut the feed. The screen at the gate went dark. We watched the monitor for a long minute. The car did not move. Then slowly it reversed, turned around, and drove back down the mountain. The security room was silent. Luca turned to me, his expression unreadable. Then he gave a single sharp nod. "They will not be back tonight." I let out a breath I had not realized I had been holding, my knees suddenly feeling weak. I had faced down a threat. I had used my wits, the lessons from the books, the aura of Dante's power, and I had won. When Dante returned the next day, Luca was the one who told him what had happened. I was in the library pretending to read when Dante found me. He stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching me. "My advisor," he said softly, a faint, proud smile on his lips. "Luca told me. You handled it perfectly." "I was scared," I admitted, looking up from my book. "Of course you were," he said, walking into the room. "Courage is not the absence of fear, Isabella. It is acting despite it. You protected my home while I was away. You showed them that this house is never weak, even when I am not in it." He stopped in front of my chair. "You are no longer just a student. You have been blooded." He did not touch me. He did not need to. The look in his eyes was a greater reward than any kiss. It was respect. It was an acknowledgement. It was the look one warrior gives another. And in that moment, I knew the transformation was complete. The 20-year-old girl was gone, locked away in a past that no longer belonged to me. In her place was a woman who understood power, who could wield it, and who was ready to stand beside the king. The air in the library shifted, charged with the unspoken weight of what I had done. Dante's praise was not a gentle thing. It was an anvil, forging me into something new and unbreakable. He did not linger on the moment, but the look in his eyes, a mix of fierce pride and possessive satisfaction, stayed with me long after he left the room. I had passed a test I had not even known I was taking. The following week was a whirlwind of final wedding preparations, but the frantic energy felt different now. I was no longer a passive participant being dressed and preened. I was a general preparing for a strategic campaign. My mother fussed over the shade of the napkins, but my mind was elsewhere as I nodded along. I was calculating the security implications of the guest list, the cathedral's sightlines, and the hired staff's loyalty for the reception. I was seeing the world through Dante's eyes, through the lens of threat and control. The night before the wedding, a large box was delivered to my suite. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was my wedding dress. It was not the elaborate style gown my mother had helped me choose. This was something else entirely. It was a column of heavy ivory silk, starkly simple with long sleeves and a high neckline. It was elegant, severe, and powerful. It was a statement, not a fantasy. A note was tucked inside in Dante's sharp handwriting. Wear this and meet me in the garden at midnight. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the final test before the vows. I dismissed Solana, telling her I wanted to be alone. As the clock ticked toward midnight, I slipped the dress from the box. It felt like a second skin, the fabric whispering of immense power and unspoken history. I did not look like a blushing bride. I looked like a queen ready to ascend her throne. The moon was full, casting the manicured gardens in a silvery, ethereal light. He was waiting for me by the koi pond, a tall, dark silhouette against the shimmering water. He turned as I approached, and I saw his breath catch, his eyes darkening as they traveled over me in the dress he had chosen. "You look," he began, his voice rough, then seemed to discard the word he was going to use. "You look like you were born to wear this." "It is not the dress my mother picked," I said, stopping a few feet from him. "This is not your mother's wedding," he replied. He closed the distance between us but still did not touch me. The space between us hummed with a tension that had been building for weeks. "Tomorrow we will stand in front of a priest and 500 people and say words that will bind us together in the eyes of God and man. But this," he gestured between us, "this agreement we have, this partnership, it deserves its own vows away from the cameras and the lies." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn, leather-bound book. It looked ancient. This was my father's and his father's before him. It contains the old oaths, the ones we used before the church sanitized our ceremonies. He opened it, his fingers careful on the brittle pages. The moonlight was just bright enough to read by. "The vows spoken tomorrow will be for them," he said, his gaze locked on mine. "These vows are for us, for our world. Do you understand?" I nodded, my throat too tight for words. This was more real, more terrifying than any church ceremony could ever be. He began to read, his voice low and solemn, the ancient Italian words rolling off his tongue like a prayer or a curse. I did not understand them all, but I felt their meaning. They spoke of loyalty unto death, of a bond of blood and honor that superseded all others, of a shared fate, for better or for worse in this life and beyond. They were brutal, beautiful, and absolute. When he finished, he looked at me, his eyes blazing in the moonlight. "Do you, Isabella Merchant, swear to be my strength in weakness, my counsel in confusion, and my shield against my enemies? Do you swear your loyalty, your mind, and your heart to me from this night until the last night of our lives?" This was the choice, the final irrevocable step. I thought of the key to his library, the weight of the knife in my hand, the respect in Luca's eyes, the terrifying, thrilling sense of purpose I had found in this gilded cage. I thought of the man before me, who had seen and nurtured my potential, offering power, not subjugation. He had asked for a partner, and now he was patiently waiting for my answer. My voice did not waver. "I swear it." A profound stillness settled over him. Then he spoke his own oath. "And I, Dante Caruso, swear to be your shelter in the storm, your sword in the fight, and the keeper of your soul. I swear my protection, my respect, and my life to you from this night until the last night of our lives." He closed the book. The formalities were over. What remained was the raw electric truth between us. The pretense, the patience, the distance, it all evaporated in the silver-lit silence. "Isabella," he breathed. My name, a surrender on his lips. That was all the invitation I needed. I stepped into him, my hands coming up to frame his face, and I kissed him. It was nothing like the possessive public kiss at the engagement party. This was a conflagration. It was weeks of pent-up desire, of intellectual intimacy, of shared danger, exploding into a single devastating act. His arms locked around me, crushing me to him, one hand tangling in my hair, the other splayed against the small of my back. He kissed me like a drowning man, finally reaching air, with a desperate, hungry need that I matched with my own. This was not him claiming me. This was us claiming each other. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing as if we had run a mile. His forehead rested against mine, his eyes closed. "I have wanted to do that," he rasped, "since the moment you looked at me in your father's study with more fire in your eyes than fear." "Then why did you wait?" I whispered, my fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "Because you needed to come to me," he said, his eyes opening, the obsidian depths holding me captive. "You needed to choose this, to choose me, not as your savior or your jailer, but as your partner." He brushed his thumb over my lips. "And now you have." He took my hand. "Come with me." He did not lead me to his bedroom or mine. He led me back into the house, to his study, to the heart of his power. He locked the door behind us. The room was lit only by the moon and the dying embers in the fireplace. What happened next was a slow and deliberate unraveling. He did not rush. He worshipped me with his hands and his mouth, peeling the silk wedding dress from my body, as if unveiling a masterpiece. He explored every inch of me, his touch a mixture of reverence and raw possession. And I did the same to him. I learned the map of scars on his skin, the hard plains of his body, the sound of his breath catching when I touched him. It was not a conquest. It was a discovery, a collision of two worlds, two souls in that quiet book-lined room. Later, as we lay tangled together on the rug before the fire, covered by his discarded suit jacket, the world felt remade. The silence was no longer isolating. It was intimate. I rested my head on his chest, listening to the steady, strong beat of his heart. "The Lombardo family from New York," he said into the quiet, his voice a low rumble under my ear. "The ones who sent the car to the gate. They were the ones who tried to move in on the Martinez territory." I lifted my head to look at him. This was our reality now. Pillow talk was a strategy. "What are you going to do?" A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. "We," he corrected me gently, his hand stroking my hair, "are going to teach them a lesson. After the honeymoon." The word honeymoon sounded surreal in this context, but it also felt right. This was our life now. Violence and passion, business and love, all intertwined. "Tomorrow," I said, a sudden nervous flutter in my stomach. "The wedding, it is a formality," he finished, his gaze steady and sure. "The marriage began tonight." He kissed me soft and deep. "Now, my wife, get some sleep. Tomorrow we have a performance to give." I slept in his bed that night, wrapped in his arms, the scent of him, of us all around me. The terrified girl was a distant memory. I was Isabella Caruso. I was his partner. I was his wife. And I was ready for the world to know it. The morning of the wedding, I felt a calm I had never expected. As Solana and a team of stylists fussed over me, putting my hair and makeup into the vision of a blushing bride, I felt a secret smile play on my lips. They were creating a beautiful illusion. Underneath the veil and the expertly applied makeup, I was the woman from the garden. I was the woman who had sworn an ancient oath, faced down her enemies, and shared a dawn's bed. When I walked down the aisle of the cathedral on my father's arm, I did not see the hundreds of guests. I saw only him. Dante standing at the altar was more imposing and handsome than I had ever seen him. His eyes met mine, and there was no pretense in them. There was only a fierce, blazing pride, and a love so profound it stole my breath. We said the traditional vows. I promised to love and to cherish. He promised to protect and provide. The words were beautiful, but they were just words. Our real vows had been sealed under the moonlight in a language of blood and power. When the priest pronounced us man and wife, and Dante lifted my veil, the kiss he gave me was both a promise and a warning to everyone watching. It was gentle yet firm, lasting just a second too long. A silent declaration that I was his and he was mine, and that this union marked the beginning of a new dynasty. The reception was a dazzling, noisy affair. I played my part flawlessly, the young, radiant bride. I danced with my father, who looked relieved and slightly afraid of me. I danced with Dante, his hand a brand on my back, his eyes telling me 1,000 things the crowd would never understand. It was during our first dance that Luca appeared at Dante's shoulder. He whispered a single urgent phrase just as he had at our engagement party. Dante's body went still for a fraction of a second. Then he relaxed, pulling me closer. "The Lombardos," he murmured against my hair, his voice for my ears only. "They have made their move." A shipment was intercepted at the port. I did not flinch. I did not ask questions. I leaned back, looked into my husband's eyes, and gave him a small, sharp smile. Then, "Let us go to war." His answering smile was a flash of white, predatory, and proud. The music swelled around us, but we were already in our own world. A king and his queen turning together to face the coming storm. The music faded into a dull roar in my ears. The world narrowed to the sharp, focused light in Dante's eyes. The war was no longer a theoretical future. It was here, crashing into our wedding reception. He gave a nearly imperceptible nod to Luca, who melted back into the crowd. The dance continued, our steps perfectly in sync. A beautiful lie for the watching world. "We will leave in 10 minutes, Dante said, his voice a low hum against my temple. His hand on my back was no longer a romantic gesture, but a point of contact, steadying me for what was to come. "The car will be at the side entrance. Change into something practical." I did not question him. I did not hesitate. This was the reality I had sworn to. When the song ended, I smiled brightly at the applauding guests, then leaned into Dante as if sharing a lover's secret. "I have a headache, my love. Would you mind terribly if we slipped away?" He played his part perfectly, his face a mask of concerned devotion. "Of course, Kara." He announced our early departure to a chorus of good-natured groans and well-wishes, citing my exhaustion. It was a plausible excuse. I was 20 after all, a young bride overwhelmed by the spectacle. Up in the main suite, our suite now, I tore off the heavy wedding gown. The elaborate hairstyle was next, with pins scattering on the floor. In the walk-in closet, next to Dante's rows of impeccable suits, I found what I was looking for. A set of black, tactical-style clothing, soft-soled boots. They were my size. He had known. He had prepared for this. Dressing felt like donning armor. When I emerged, Dante was waiting. Having shed his tuxedo jacket and tie, he looked at me, a flicker of approval in his gaze. Ready? Yes. We moved through the hidden corridors of the mansion, bypassing the party entirely. A black SUV with tinted windows was idling at a secluded service entrance. Luca was at the wheel. We slid into the back seat and the vehicle pulled away, leaving the glittering facade of our wedding behind. What happened? Dante's voice was now all business. Luca's eyes met his in the rearview mirror. The shipment from the pharmaceutical suppliers. It was hit at the dock. The Lombardos. They left a message. He handed a tablet back to Dante. On the screen was a photograph of one of Dante's dock supervisors tied to a chair, a single bloody gash across his cheek. Pinned to his chest was a playing card, the King of Hearts with the eyes scratched out. A cold fury settled in my stomach. This was not just business. It was a personal insult, a deliberate desecration of our wedding day. They have declared war, I said, my voice quiet but clear in the tense silence of the car. Dante's jaw was a hard line. They have, and they will learn the price of that declaration. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. You should go to the safe house. This will be messy. I shook my head. No, you said we. You said we were going to teach them a lesson. My place is with you. I was not asking for permission. I was stating a fact. He studied me for a long moment, the city light streaking across his face. Then he nodded. So be it. We did not go to the docks. We visited a nondescript warehouse in an industrial park which served as a command post. Inside, the air was thick with tension and the smell of stale coffee. A dozen of Dante's most trusted men were there, their faces grim. They looked up as we entered, and I saw the surprise in their eyes when they saw me, quickly masked by deference. They knew what had happened in the security room. They knew I was not here as a decoration. Dante took center stage, his presence instantly commanding the room. The Lombardos have broken the peace. They have stolen from us, and they have insulted us on my wedding day. His voice was calm, but it carried a lethal chill. This cannot be answered with a negotiation. It must be answered with fire. He began issuing orders with a chilling efficiency. Teams were dispatched to secure other assets. Alliances were formed. Payments were authorized. I stood slightly behind him, listening, absorbing the brutal calculus of his retaliation. He was not just planning a counterattack. He was planning to dismantle the Lombardo operation on the West Coast entirely. After an hour, he turned to me. What are you thinking? The men looked at me, their curiosity palpable. I met Dante's gaze. They hit us today for a reason. They thought you would be distracted, vulnerable. They have shown their hand. Their arrogance is their weakness. We should not just hit back. We should let them think they have won. Dante's eyes narrowed. Explain. They will be expecting a swift, violent response. They will be fortified. So, we do nothing publicly. We let the rumor mill churn. Let them grow confident, complacent. Meanwhile, we find the leak. They were aware of the shipment and the security rotation. There is a traitor in our organization. We find them first. Then, when they are celebrating their little victory, we cut the head off the snake. We take everything. A slow, grim smile spread across Dante's face. He looked around at his men. You see, this is why she is here. He turned back to me. The leak. It has to be someone with high-level access, I said. Someone who knew you would be occupied today. I pulled out the tablet Luca had given us and opened the personnel files for the dock operation. I had spent the last few weeks cross-referencing everything. The foreman who was taken, his brother is a mid-level lieutenant. He has gambling debts, substantial ones, to a bookie who is known to do business with the Lombardos. I showed Dante the screen, the financial records I had pieced together from the access he had given me. It was all there, a trail of desperation and betrayal. Dante's expression was granite. He looked at Luca. Pick up the lieutenant, Antonio. Bring him to the secondary location. I want to have a conversation with him. Luca nodded and left with 2 other men. The next few hours were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Dante made a series of very public, very calm phone calls. He congratulated his associates on the wedding and discussed his plans for an extended honeymoon. He was the picture of a man utterly unbothered. Meanwhile, we waited. It was close to dawn when Luca returned. His knuckles were raw. He talked. It was Antonio. He gave them the schedule, The manifest. Everything for $50,000 and a promise of a promotion. Dante's face was a cold mask. And the Lombardos. Where is their command center here? A penthouse suite at the Grand Majestic Hotel. They are throwing a party to celebrate. Dante stood. Then let us go wish them congratulations. The convoy of black SUVs moved through the pre-dawn streets like a funeral procession. I sat beside Dante, my hand resting on his arm. I was not afraid. I was focused. This was the world I had chosen. The car stopped a block from the Grand Majestic. Dante turned to me. You will wait here. This part is not for you. I saw the finality in his eyes. This was the line. The violence he would not let me see. I nodded. Be careful. He cupped my face, his thumb stroking my cheek. I am always careful. Then he was gone, swallowed by the darkness with his men. I sat in the silent car, the driver, a stoic statue in the front seat. I watched the hotel. Minutes ticked by. Then I saw a flicker of movement on the penthouse balcony. A struggle. A silent, brutal ballet in the dark. And then nothing. Dante returned 20 minutes later. He smelled of night air and gunpowder. He got into the car, his movements precise, controlled. He did not speak. He took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. His were cold. We drove back to the glass house as the sun began to paint the sky with streaks of rose and gold. Our wedding night was over. We entered the silent, empty house. The remnants of the reception had been cleared away. It was just us. He led me to the wall of glass in the living room, looking out at the city waking up. He stood behind me, his arms wrapping around me, holding me tight against his chest. It is done, he said, his voice quiet in the vast room. The Lombardo family no longer has a presence in San Francisco. I leaned back against him, the solid reality of him a comfort. And the traitor? I asked. He has been dealt with. The finality in his tone told me everything I needed to know. We stood there for a long time, gazing out at the city that was now unquestionably ours. The fear was gone. The uncertainty was gone. All that was left was a profound, unshakable certainty. I love you, Dante, I whispered into the quiet. It was the first time I had said the words, and they felt truer than any vow spoken in a church. His arms tightened around me. He turned me in his embrace, his dark eyes searching mine. He saw the woman I had become, his partner, his equal, his queen. I love you, Isabella, he said, and the words were a vow more binding than any other. My wife. He kissed me then, not with the fire of the night before, but with a deep, soul-wrenching tenderness. This promised a lifetime of power, passion, and a love forged in shadow and sealed in blood. We had faced our first battle together and won. Our empire had begun. The dawn after the war was a quiet, sacred thing. The city below us began its daily hum while we stood in our silent fortress, bound by a night of violence and a love that felt older than either of us could remember. Dante did not leave my side. He led me to the main suite, and this time there was no separation. This was our room. He drew a bath in the deep, freestanding tub, the steam rising in fragrant clouds. He undressed me with a slow, deliberate care that felt like a ritual, washing the phantom scent of gunpowder and tension from my skin. He was tending to his partner, his equal, after a battle. When he was done, he wrapped me in a thick, soft robe and led me to the bed. We did not make love. We held each other in the growing light, our bodies curved together, and slept the deep, dreamless sleep of the utterly spent. We emerged hours later, not as a new bride and groom, but as a Don and his advisor, the lines of our partnership now irrevocably drawn in trust. The honeymoon was a fiction we maintained for the outside world, a planned trip to a private villa that we never took. Instead, our honeymoon was a week of quiet seclusion within the glass house, an intense, focused integration. Dante opened the final doors to his empire. He sat with me at the massive desk in his study and showed me the accurate ledgers, the complex web of legitimate businesses, and the darker, more profitable veins that ran beneath them. He explained the delicate ecosystem of bribes, alliances, and threats that kept it all running. I asked questions, sharp, intelligent questions, born from my reading and my own observations. He answered them with a frankness that was more intimate than any physical touch. This is the casino, he said, pointing to a revenue stream. It loses money on paper. It is where we clean the cash from the other operations. And the city councilman, I asked, pointing to a name on a list. He ensures our building permits are approved without delay. In return, his mistress has a very comfortable apartment. It was a crash course in applied power, and I was a star pupil. My mind, once filled with the dates of art movements, was now a living database of logistics and human weakness. I thrived on it. A week after the wedding, my parents came for dinner. It was a strange, surreal affair. My mother chattered about wedding gifts and thank you notes. My father was quiet, almost cowed, his eyes darting between Dante and me, sensing the new unassailable dynamic. I was no longer his daughter to be managed. I was the Signora. I saw the moment he truly understood it, when Solana asked me a question about the menu, bypassing my mother entirely. And I gave a calm, decisive answer without consulting anyone. After they left, Dante poured us both a glass of Amaro. "You unsettle him," he said, a note of satisfaction in his voice. "Good," I replied, taking a sip of the bitter liqueur. "He needs to be unsettled." The following Monday, Dante took me to the headquarters of his most public-facing enterprise, Caruso Global Holdings, a sleek office with views that rivaled those from our home. He introduced me to the stunned executives, not as his young wife, but as Isabella Caruso, his new strategic advisor. I wore one of the severe, elegant dresses he had bought for me, my hair pulled back in a sleek knot. I said little, but I listened to everything. My presence was a silent, disruptive force. They saw a girl. Dante saw his heir. This new double life became our rhythm. Mornings were often spent at Caruso Global, where I learned the language of corporate finance and the nuances of legal loopholes. Afternoons were spent in his study, where we reviewed the grittier aspects of the business, the worker disputes, the protection rackets, the ongoing tensions with the remnants of rival families. I was the bridge between his two worlds, the legitimate and the shadow, and I was learning to walk both with ease. One evening, about a month after the wedding, we were in his study. I was reviewing the security protocols for a new shipment coming in from Southeast Asia, cross-referencing the crew manifests with the financial records Luca had provided. A name snagged my attention. "This man," I said, pointing to the screen, "Matteo Rossi. He is new. However, his banking activity reveals large regular deposits that began 3 months before his hiring from an account linked to a shell corporation." Dante leaned over my shoulder, his scent enveloping me. "The rivals are trying again. A slower, more subtle approach." He sounded almost pleased. "They are learning." "What do we do?" I asked. "We do nothing," he said. "We watch him. We feed him false information. We use him to mislead our enemies. You have given us a valuable asset, Isabella, a window into their plans." He was turning my discovery into a strategic advantage. It was brilliant. I felt a surge of pride so potent it left me breathless. That night, as we lay in bed, the city a tapestry of lights below us, he traced the line of my spine. "You have surpassed every expectation I had," he murmured into the darkness. "You are not just my wife. You are the greatest strategic acquisition I have ever made." I turned to face him. In the dim light, his features were soft. The harsh lines of command relaxed. This was my Dante, the man behind the dawn. "I love you," I said again because the truth of it still astonished me. He kissed me a slow, deep kiss that held the weight of our shared secrets, our combined strength. "And I love you," he whispered against my lips. "My queen." The next day he gave me my own office at Caruso Global next to his. It was a statement as powerful as any vow. I was no longer just learning. I was operating. The final piece of my transformation fell into place a few days later. I was leaving the office, Marco waiting with the car, when a man stepped out of the shadows of the parking garage. He was large, dressed in cheap clothes, his intent clear in his posture. He was not one of ours. "The Don's new little toy," he sneered, stepping toward me. "The rivals send their regards." My heart did not even skip a beat. The training took over. I dropped my weight just as Dante had taught me. As he lunged, I pivoted, driving my elbow hard into his throat. He gagged, stunned. In that fraction of a second, I did not reach for the knife I now often carried. I used the sharp metal tip of my umbrella, jabbing it with precise force into the nerve cluster on his thigh. He cried out, his leg buckling. Marco was there in an instant, his weapon drawn, but the man was already on the ground, writhing. I stood over him, my breathing even. I felt nothing but a cold, apparent calm. Marco looked from the man to me, his expression one of stunned respect. "Take him to the secondary location," I said, my voice as steady as Dante's ever was. "I will inform my husband." When I told Dante that night, his reaction was not one of panic or anger, but of profound, fierce pride. He pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly. "You did not need me," he said, and it was the highest compliment he could have paid me. "No," I agreed, resting my head on his chest. "I did not." The girl who had been forced to marry a mafia boss was gone. The woman who remained was his partner in every sense of the word. I was his lover, his confidant, his strategist, and his shield. The love he gave me was not the gentle, safe love of fairy tales. It was a demanding, brutal, all-consuming force that had forged me into something more substantial than I had ever dreamed I could be. It was a love that had given me not just a man but a kingdom.